on the theme, Combating Corruption, the Sure Way to Effective Service Delivery. Combating Corruption, the Sure Way to Effective Service Delivery. This theme speaks directly to the core of Uganda's most pressing challenges. Corruption remains the single biggest roadblock to our nation's progress. Year after year, Ugandans are told that resources are scarce, yet we continue to see trillions lost to mismanagement, inflated contracts, and outright theft. These are not just abstract figures. Honorable colleagues, they represent stolen opportunities for our children, our communities, and our future. Colleagues, let me tell you a story that most of you may be familiar with, and I believe it will connect with us one way or the other. Many years ago, an elderly farmer lived in a remote village. This farmer worked tirelessly to provide enough food for his family, like almost Ugandans. He labored through the seasons, ensuring his granary was always full. But over time, he noticed something troubling. His food was continuously disappearing, far too quickly. Every morning, the pile grew smaller. One night, this farmer decided to stay awake and watch. What he discovered broke his heart. He discovered that rats had found their way into his granary through hidden cracks and were stealing what rightfully belonged to his family. The farmer realized that complaining alone would not solve the problem. He could not just set traps in one corner while leaving other holes open. He had to find every crack, block every entry, and stop the loss at its source. Distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues, this is not just a story about a farmer. It is a story about modern-day Uganda, as we know it today. The funds that should be going toward healthcare, schools, roads, and other vital services are disappearing due to corruption. The story revolves around a teacher who is faced with the daunting task of instructing a classroom of 100 students while being severely underpaid and lacking necessary resources. This story revolves around a young person who is out of luck for their job, as they have hunted severally due to the misallocation of funds intended for infrastructure and industries. Colleagues, we must understand that those in power will frequently try to denigrate us as the opposition. They'll accuse us of being overly critical or disruptive. But let me tell you something that I believe in very strongly. If standing up for fairness makes us disruptive, then we should wear that label with pride. If demanding responsibility is interpreted as complaining, then let us complain louder and more strongly. Because if we do not speak up for the people of Uganda, who will, honorable colleagues? Like the farmer, we face a choice. We can either sit back and watch as our resources are plundered, or we can take action to protect what rightfully belongs to all of us as the people of Uganda. And honorable colleagues, that's why we are here today. This workshop, as I said, is not just another meeting. It's an opportunity for us to pause, reflect, and strategize on how best we ought to fulfill our responsibilities as the opposition. And as the opposition, our duty is not simply to challenge the government, but to offer real solutions. Ugandans are looking for leadership. They're looking for answers. They're looking for hope. I'm very convinced those answers, that hope, is here with us. We have got what it takes to inoculate that hope in the people of Uganda. And so that's why we sit here today, to draw strategies, to plan for our forthcoming alternative budget, which we shall present to the nation. But then there are processes that feed into that. And it's important that people out there know that there are processes, that eventually the alternative budget that we are going to present to the country will have gone through scrutiny, advice. And this year's is a little different. As you have noticed, we have reached out to all opposition political parties. We've reached out to civil society organizations and various stakeholders, asking them for an input into our alternative budget. So this year's alternative budget is not one where a few of us as shadow ministers get to sit with our technical team and craft out good plans and policies. That's possible, and we have always done a good job at that. But we thought it important that we make it a consultative process, so that eventually when we present this alternative budget to the people of Uganda, they see themselves through it because of that consultative element. Today we will hear from experts, including the Parliamentary Budget Office and civil society actors, who will deepen our understanding of the budget and its implications. But more importantly, we will define the alternative policies and priorities that we aim to champion in 2025-2026. We must craft policies that redirect public funds towards effective service delivery and away from wasteful expenditure and corruption. Honorable colleagues, many times you hear the public say, you in the opposition, you complain, you critique, what do you have to offer? Incidentally, every year we offer alternatives, every single year. And I would like to encourage people to look at the ministerial policy statements that are tabled by government ministers. Juxtapose that against our alternative ministerial policy statements. You will see a stark difference. You will see that we put energy and time and emotion into the work that we do because it is very emotive work. We want better. So I'd like to encourage us to read these documents, to interact with them, so that the people of Uganda get to see that we have something better we are offering. We are not just complaining, and we must complain. As I said, those who complain that we are complaining, we shall wear that label with pride. I urge all of us colleagues to participate actively in this workshop as we sharpen our strategies, deepen our understanding, and craft policies that will make a real difference in the lives of the people of Uganda. The future of our country depends on the decisions that we make and the commitment we show now. Colleagues, the future of our country depends on the decisions that we make and the commitment that we show now. Finally, colleagues, as we shape the 2025-2026 alternative budget, let it reflect our unwavering commitment to accountability, no tolerance to corruption, and the well-being of our people. I wish us all a productive workshop, and I now declare this workshop open. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Budget has two sides, the revenue side and the expenditure side. More often than not, most people talk about expenditure. What to increase money for the health sector, for roads, and what about the taxes? What about the sort of expenditure? When you look at the composition of Uganda's budget, of late, of course there has been an increase in terms of resources domestically collected, but also we rely to some extent on some of our development partners. And if there is any shock outside there, it has a ripple effect on our budget. So those are very, especially this year's budget, it's very important that we take a cognizance of the fact that there is some freeze on some funding for some.
On behalf of civil society and the citizens, Muntu thank you. The previous presenter has talked a lot about the basics of the budget. So I will deal with the political questions and maybe the constitutional questions, since that is my bias or area I specialize in. Just for purposes of emphasizing a few elements, budget is the most important economic policy tool of the government, and it provides a comprehensive statement of nation's priorities. As representatives of the people, you are always our eyes and ears, and the opposition specifically then becomes the critical voice of the population as the alternative government to come up with pro-people priorities. In the situation we are in right, Honorable Leader of Opposition, we are in a current fiscal squeeze as a country, but also as a whole group, with a shrinking funding base, including the freeze of donor aid by USAID globally, and that has affected critical sectors, especially health and education in our country. The previous weeks, we saw Parliament debating failure of the Ministry of Education to come up with a A-level curriculum. The process of consultants was being funded by USAID. And the question that Parliament should be asking is who is going to cover the gaps of all sectors in health and education, especially where USAID funds have been withdrawn. Is the current budget framework taking care of that? I was waiting for the director budget to address that. I hope you will get back to that question. Because as a citizen, I expect government to cover its critical sectors like health and education and stop relying on donors and foreigners for these critical sectors of citizens. We have caused a lot of worry to the people living with HIV/AIDS. I know that after the first announcement of donor freeze, the HIV/AIDS clinics called their patients to pick medicine for 6 months. But the political statements going on can also cause some death. Because people living on these health drugs don't need to worry about, especially poor people. So if you have people worried about food, most people living with HIV/AIDS, what about a balanced diet? Now they've increased worry of uncertainty over medication. I would expect the leader of opposition and your cabinet, shadow cabinet, to make sure that these critical sectors are covered by government 100%. Whether USAID funds are restored or not, donor funds should go to less critical sectors, and health and education should be funded by government.
Government sometimes has vetoed the parliament by saying the parliament does not have power to amend the budget, when those provisions are very clear. Article 155, Article 156, the parliament can review the budget and make recommendations. And so if you are not very familiar with the legal framework, your authority, your power can be undermined if you are not very cognizant of the various provisions. The other provision is the Public Finance Management Act, this law. I expect every member of parliament to have this at this time, because everything relating to budget is managed by this, whether they are supplementaries, whether they are executions, whether they are environments. So if you don't have this provision, and at least I participated in the making of this law. For those members of parliament who are here, we took like 4 months, and this law has been applauded as one of the best public finance management laws in Africa, if not globally, in terms of what it contains. But the challenge is the implementation. Do we allow it to work as it were? Of course, barely 2 months, I think, were they less than a year, we had to amend one of the provisions. So, other members of parliament, Lop and your colleagues, this is a must read, a must know, a must have document for members of parliament if they are to check on how government is implementing the public finance management architecture in the country.
That IGG is powerless. She only investigates people that Museveni wants investigated. Go and ask her. You remember, she even had a press conference, I'm going to investigate Parliament. Did she ever investigate Parliament? So these ones are like...